Hello, friends and adventurers. I'm Em, and today we'll be discussing a situation where one dungeon master is running the campaign for only one player. And yet I'm all too familiar with this situation, having ran so myself for quite a bit of time through my years of DMing. Welcome to the DM table. And thank you, Lee Bob, for this subject for today's theme. So let's get to it. Important thing with running one-on-one, as it's called, is Valerie Assurance. Reassurance to your player that this isn't an unusual or weird situation. Which today is much more easier than when I started DMing, because we have much more internet and we have YouTube, and you can see DMs like me casting their vote for your DM to reassure you that this is not gonna be that unusual or even different. You'll still play with a group of friends, you and your DM. You'll become fast friends if everything goes right, because whether in general role-playing or in this one-on-one situation, doesn't matter. It's the same task for the DM, to be your support, to be your friend, to get you the best experience anybody can have in role-playing. So DM usually is a very selfless person that took this upon themselves to bring this to the players. That's what we DMs do, so don't worry. For it to be the finest, the most, it's better than even having infinite amount and duration of all your best games that you could possibly imagine. Believe me, I'm a creature of video games, and yet I can say this with no uncertainty that I would trade them all for certain endless supply of a DM. So that's how much of an opportunity this is. Now that we have assured the player, as you may also do your part as a DM to assure your player and, think of few things to tell them, how to reassure them, how to guide them, how to give them good advice on starting this up, because this might be the situation that there's only two of you. After all parties need to start somewhere, and one of the best of advice that I have heard anywhere from a dungeon master is, if you can do one thing today, play. So don't let your party searching from you two stop you two from playing before you find the third member. If that's even the situation, because sometimes your DM might be running two different groups and you're start of a second group or something like that because of different campaigns and different teams or something like that. Even if you're the only person in the group, this will be fine, and you as a player don't have to do anything different. Now, as for the DM, there is a bit of a difference. Not much, but a bit. I still love, as I've said, running one-on-one, because quality can be superb, because you have all that attention to detail that you can pour into this one person's experience where there are no other distractions. So that's one of the advantages. Now, as for what you need to prepare a little bit more clearly, not extra, but more, you need to be more on it, shall we say. You need to more clearly understand your preparation entirely, but not all of the preparation. You just need to be more on top of these few categories of your preparation, nothing else for that, really. So these are bosses, equipment, locations, relations. For running properly, you need to have ahead of time somewhat really good balance of what kind of equipment you give out when. You also need to know what can be fought and when and where, and more even importantly, you know where your quests and hooks and as I call them, relations lie, because you will be playing almost a turn-based game. Your player will do something, you will then calculate what happens in the background during that time, from all the relations and sides and people invested into the situations and happenings in the world. All the factions, all the allies, all the enemies, what did they do during the player's turn? So to sort of achieve living simultaneous turns, So once you do and the player does another thing, you calculate another section and so on and so forth. You can keep to nonlinearity this way because you can always simulate in the background what happens due to players' actions, and this is how to run the whole thing quickly. No need to have too much pre-preparation of story or anything. You just need to understand the crucial relations in your world so that the story sort of runs along. As player does actions, so do other people do actions, and the story is created from interactions. So that's how you run, and that's how I would run even for more people, so I feel it's most efficient. Yes, you probably know what the campaign is about, what is the major plot point, what is the big twist, what is the major finale, or something like that. You might not even know some of these, but you generally want to know what brings excitement and drive forward to the table. And once you do, you can derive those relations so that they can act out their roles as the player acts out his or hers. And this is one thing that you need to be on top of before the session, during the session, and then work on after the session. As for locations, you just want your locations to be generally known to you, where you can describe them well enough. What kind of city it is, what kind of place it is, where are the important places, what are the more beautiful ones, more important ones, more, set pieces that will be happening during the following of the trail of the plot that unveils and unfolds. So you need to generally have a picture. You don't need to prepare the whole description, you just need to have a full visual of what it is that you're describing, and then once the player reaches the place, you'll be able to describe it in detail because you can see it. And this is done for all the relevant locations that will soon come up, like the first base of whatever faction that the player will visit, the town locations that the player might visit, that are important enough to have their own preparation, because you can derive from the world what an average store looks like on the fly. You can do it on the spot. You can draw all kinds of maps during. It can be even like revealing Fog of War. It's one of the things that I like, is that when the player moves around, I can draw the map for them as they move around. I do this with my hand and a pencil, so I don't know how that would work online or something, but that's one of my suggestions, to just draw out the map as player goes along, to describe the locations, the ones that are not of entirely crucial uniqueness, to derive from your understanding of the world. Yet not making them generic, but investing yourself fully from your volume of knowledge and understanding of the best, nicest locations of such kind that fit the theme that you have witnessed in other campaigns, video games, movies, books, whatever it is that you like to watch, read, and so on. And then make your world come to life around the player as the player moves along. The biggest remaining difference is other characters. You might want actually a party for your player. And again, this is not different from when you're running for 2 people or so. It might just be a bit more crucial, but I always pay attention to this. Characters that will be joining the party that are not player ran, but DM ran. And yet you do not need to worry about creating one of those DMPCs that people are so afraid of, because as long as you hold to some amount of reason of how a character is designed to be a party member, well, this thing exists, again, in video games everywhere, and if it's done well, it can be done perfectly, well, fine. So how do we do this properly for a player? For one thing, do not predetermine who the player will be with. I know this seems hard, but that's one of the methods that I use to keep everything working as intended. So instead, you sort of lurk and you present all kinds of very well thought up people that live their lives, do their things, and see who the player clicks with the most and who the player invites by themselves. And not just that, you try to make for the best characters that you can, that have these qualities that the player would appreciate. That, for one thing, you hear from the player, because you want to ask the player ahead of time what kind of campaign do they want, what will they play, what are their activities, how do they want to be perceived, who do they want to play with, what are their favorite characters from favorite franchises and whatnot have you. You want to know as much as you can, you want to ask as much as you can, and you want to talk with the player about planning in what people call Session Zero, and you can look that up if you're new here and you're just learning and don't know yet what Session Zero is. And yes, you want to know as much as possible, but then not just build on it, but take all this into consideration, run as best characters as possible. Then, when player invites a character, what can that character do for being in the party? Can the character succeed in the relationship with the player? Can they be friends? Can they cooperate together? Does the character pay attention to the player? Does the character like the player? Does the character have personality that fits with the player? Does the character want the player's company? Because, a character can actually refuse to go such long times with the player or, live with them, be in the party with them. They can refuse for reasons of their thoughts of incompatibility. So do keep this in mind. The character that is fitting is the one that is invited by the player, or at least character that is so compatible with the player that you can see that the player will invite them as soon as they start interacting. So the character, in order to perform their personality of being somebody with initiative, kind of invites themselves to the party, but by asking the player essentially, because player circle of friends and whoever party is on the player themselves, and they should be asked about who joins them. And then when the person has interest in the player, when the person likes what player does, maybe likes how player looks, maybe is attracted to the player as a friend or as a love interest, in any case, this needs to sort of flow naturally from the dynamics of the friendship of the two people. If they can see into each other the value where they would like to spend time with each other, then that's where you know that this person is okay to accept to join the party. And then this person keeps doing this, keeps being of value, but not without a role, not without acceptance. Let's give an example. In a dungeon, this person doesn't run everything, run ahead, demonstrate everything, and simply spoil the player, and player just sits in the back and does next to nothing or does as much as they can, but the DM is expecting a professional player and acting their own character like it, and then the player might not be as professional of a player or something like that, and then we have a DMPC of notoriousness. No. You need to multi-thread the situation so that this person has what to say, where to go, and what to touch in a dungeon, but for this to be equivalent part of the experience, in stages, sort of. If the player finds a trap and the person that the player is traveling with is a rogue or something, the person can offer themselves to disarm the trap, or maybe the person finds the trap, but the MRN character's lack of skill for another thing lets the player do the other thing. And if they both have similar skills, that's fine too, because they can check alternative parts of the room, they can find different passageways, and then both can make use of both. For example, if the player does well to clear the path ahead, disarm traps, kill the monsters now together with this person, then when they search the room, this person might find a hidden room or a hidden passageway, but player might also find something else, and so on and so forth. Just keep it reasonable and dynamic. It's like you're writing a second character and the player is writing the first character. In this case, you would be able to balance this so that the character is in a living manner, contributing yet not overwhelming the player in any amount, because no need to worry that you're toning the character down because of player. Player wouldn't have met this character and partied with them if they weren't similar of a talent. That's about how these relationships work by dynamics. Otherwise, the NPC might have helped and left the party soon enough and not tried to be overwhelming, because in these roles people would probably understand that they do not want to overshadow and choke out potential for growth, because their lives may depend on this. Adventuring is a very dangerous profession anyways. And even if you're not in the classical situation like that, it still bears reason that most nice people that the player might meet do not want to be overbearing on top of their own campaign. They don't want to muscle in on something that is not their place if they're too capable, and players' skill will determine how good the party will perform. And then, after you have concluded after checking a few times, after you have concluded how much your player likes the characters that he or she is traveling with, they can sometimes even exchange one for another and so on and so forth, meet up with the first. There could be some absence, this and that, they can request something. I mean, you can talk about this with your player, and the player may have some requests, and certainly you want to listen to player's review of the situation and react accordingly, and instead of adjusting the character too much, run with the personality of the character, keep it accurate, and then when needed, switch the party members, get new ones in on the picture, have character growth, but keep to realisticness of the situation and the personality and the whole persona of the character in question, and that's how you will have a lifelike party member that your player can party with. And you can have several, it's not a problem once you test on one and things get good and you see that the player wants more. And other than that, as I said, you check even further with the player, you listen to their feedback, you listen to everything that they have to say about the characters, and practice. Now, further, there is this situation where player doesn't know what to do, but you can help. You see, when there's a group, the group might take over. Somebody has an idea. When there's multiple people, somebody may stop, but others may continue, and they'll figure out what to do. When there's one person and they get stuck, they'll get stuck. But you can sort of unstick them by being a reminder. You can remind them what they could do. Not spoil them on what they should do, just remind them of basic options, like you said that you are gonna go there, so you might, or there's still this and that thing that you could do in this room, as dictated by your class skills, or so on and so forth. This is only for when the player really has lack of idea and is standing there and asking you, what could I do, or just forgetting and not remembering and not doing a thing. You don't need to do this when players taking action. This is only for players who really avoid taking action continuously and expect everything to happen with them barely saying a word, ever. This can happen even with really good players, when they just sort of give up from their input due to feeling that there's overwhelming play from the world, from other characters, from you, from anything else. It doesn't have to be that you overwhelm them with the characters as much as that the situation is so branching, so big and so open that they actually forget that they could be taking initiative and taking a path and doing the thing. So you can at least clarify some paths and things for them so that they remember that this is what their character knows, this is what their character remembers, and this is what their character can perform. And once you have just given them the basic options, they might improvise and work out what better thing that they want to do, or more complex thing that they want to think about to do on their own. And hopefully this is enough for them to loosen up and play. So I hope players, DMs, and adventurers, I hope this wasn't too over the top, and yet that it was unique, and if it was, maybe you can spare me a click and I could see you here perhaps next or even every week. I would also love to hear about your experiences, how you dealt with this, and maybe if you have some questions, I would love to answer them in the comments. So do please write, if you will. And till next time, bye.